Stay tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled are architect John Arnold and actress, playwright Wendy Johnson. Architect John Arnold was born and raised on the East Coast, received a BS from the University of Massachusetts, and his master's in architecture at the University of Washington. John has studied environmental design, landscape architecture, and architecture with an emphasis on preserving the cultural landscape. He's an advocate of the HPOZ, and let's talk about the HPOZ.
Sure,
what is that? People, I say HPOZ, nobody knows what I'm talking about.
Well, HPOZ is specific to the city of Los Angeles. It is only, it's the way the city designates historic districts, so it's their fancy planning department way of saying historic district, and it stands for Historic Preservation Overlay Zone. So basically they have their basic zoning, and over that they give it a historic preservation overlay.
So just only the city of LA?
That is their planning department's designation for historic districts.
So if the person who's in charge of this certain area, the HPOZ area, says you can't do something, can the city come in and say you can do it?
Well, the HPOZ is an arm of the city, and what the city does, the city appoints a board of 5 people to the HPOZ board, and that board is appointed by the mayor, the city council, the Cultural Heritage Commission. So basically the city's entrusting that 5-person board with the decisions that affect the historic district. So basically when that board makes a decision, the planning department can override it, but usually they don't.
Are those people permanent, or do they rotate in and out, or what do they do?
They are not permanent. They're 4-year terms, and I think there's a maximum of 2 years, so 8 years total.
And so you're very much an advocate of this.
Of course.
And tell us why.
Oh, first of all, I think LA has a fascinating history that's not well known and not well respected. I don't think it has been respected over the years. With the HPOZ program, the Office of Historic Resources and the LA Conservancy all working together to preserve individual buildings and historic districts. And I think LA has a fascinating history, and I think it needs to be preserved, both for economic reasons, for filming to begin with, and also it's a beautiful history.
What are we preserving, actually?
Basically a suburban life, which is the single family, the bungalow covered with roses on a lot. You know, that's what's been sold for the last 100 years. And I think for the most part, the HPOZs focus on the single-family districts. So that's what the historic districts do, that they blanket an area. So if there's a collection of bungalows or of modernist buildings, they mostly preserve the single-family neighborhoods.
And how do you get into that community of being preserved?
It's a very long process. My neighborhood of Jefferson Park, which is in West Adams, just west of USC, it took us a lot. We're a bungalow neighborhood from turn-of-the-century bungalows, 1906. And we're in South LA, which is a traditionally neglected neighborhood. In the planning department, it just kind of cast aside. And we really had to prove ourselves worthy. And I think everyone recognized that our architecture was outstanding, but we didn't have a lot of political force to display that. And we also had to gather political support from the neighborhood. So we had to really go deep into the neighborhood to get support for the historic district.
So for the people who are living there, they have to support it.
Yes.
And I think the idea is to come in and before anything's been changed, because where I live, houses are being knocked down and new McMansions are being built.
Yes.
Have any changes been made in Jefferson Park, or did you get HPOZ right away?
We just got HPOZ status in July of last year, and one of the reasons why we pursued it is that we were losing things monthly, daily, weekly. You know, houses would be stripped without permits. We had a lot of non-permitted work. Things would just be stripped off. They'd be turned from architectural gems into typical suburban stucco houses that you could find anywhere. And so that was recognized that we had an architectural legacy that was going away.
Were there well-known architects in this area, or was it just because it was like a tract house? We have to call them tract houses because they were all built the same way, right?
Another good question. In Jefferson Park, up the hill from Jefferson Park, there were the big houses up the hill. Big houses that all had architect names. Jefferson Park was a middle-class streetcar suburb. It was the bankers, the mortgage lenders, the middle guys. And the houses in Jefferson Park were small, they're modest craftsman bungalows. Very few of us have architect-designed houses. They were all built from pattern books or by contractors. So the house next door to me was built by the same contractor. He bought 2 lots, he built them both together, they're almost identical. So it's very few architects in Jefferson Park.
But they all have a certain style.
Absolutely.
And is the style all the same?
Basically, in my neighborhood, Jefferson Park, it's all technically transitional bungalows. There's transition from Victorian into craftsman.
Like wood? Are they wood?
Wood frame, wood details, and within that there are subsets of the things that were popular back then were Chinese architecture. So some of our houses, my house in particular, has Chinese details. Some of them are Swiss, window boxes with little cutouts. So each one, there were sub-styles, but they were mostly focused on wooden details. For the transitional was some Victorian knickknacks, very intricate with little brackets and things.
Does it follow into the house as well? That same style?
Absolutely. I've seen more exuberance put into a small 1,200-foot building in Jefferson Park, where you go into a small room and the moldings at the ceiling are this deep. They just scroll and scroll and scroll off into the.
And that was the original design. That was how they wanted it to be.
Absolutely.
What about the architecture? You were talking. I know you studied environmental landscape, and you have. I think sustainable. It sounded to me like you have sustainable planting. Was that what was going on in the area at the time?
It actually wasn't. What was going on was more of probably an English vision of roses and lawns and hydrangeas, which are a lot of imported plant material, and that was mostly brought in from the East Coast. And so it actually was a discussion when we were putting the HPOZ, I don't want to say rules, but the guidelines for the HPOZ, whether to go off from that, because everyone recognizes that's a very water-dependent landscape. And so we did ask the question, what would be an appropriate landscape that might be more sustainable, that would match the style of architecture? And craftsman bungalow architecture is a California thing.
Yes, I know that. So I thought, so it goes with it, even though it wasn't there in the beginning.
I think it goes better having the native plants, because they're more sages and grays, they're subdued colors, and a lot of the original craftsman houses were very subdued colors, and I think it matches better.
The other thing that I think you brought up, or that I was thinking about, was the wildflower. And you have wildflowers there too?
I do have wildflowers.
But are we going to be able to preserve our wildflowers? They're just like disappearing, it seems like.
It's sad. I recognize that to go away from that, yes, going out into the hills, the places where the wildflowers are, they're being built up, and it's discouraging to see where actually where the original wildflowers is going away.
And you are very active in the West Adams.
The West Adams, I'm active in my neighborhood, in the neighborhood council. And mostly that comes through planning and land use issues. Because I'm an architect, I know a lot about planning and zoning. And in the neighborhood council, we focus on new developments, whether they will fit into the neighborhood. So and a lot of it's from a preservation standpoint, whether buildings around it will be affected, whether buildings that should be preserved are being torn down or altered.
When you were a child, you lived near a farm, and you lived in an old house.
I did.
Has that influenced?
Of course. Absolutely.
Yes?
Yeah, I think even though I love the West Coast, I'm a child of the East Coast, and I growing up in Boston, in New Hampshire, and my grandparents lived next door in a house that had its core from the 17th or the 18th century. So yes, I have an appreciation of all things old, and yeah.
And the things you were talking about in West Adams, they do tours of those houses, right?
Frequently.
Tell me how those set up.
Oftentimes, the West Adams Heritage Association sets those up, and they move around. There's 6 or 7 or 8 different historic neighborhoods.
Yeah, let's talk about those. That's what I was wondering about.
And they go.
What are they? Jefferson Park is one, obviously.
One of the newer ones in West Adams. Basically, moving out from USC. Every mile or so is another 10 years.
Is it?
So University Park has a lot of Victorian houses. They're more down by USC. And as you move out, it moves towards Craftsman, and then eventually when you get towards Crenshaw, Spanish houses.
Oh yes, we lived in Crenshaw and 43rd Street, Spanish House, Santa Barbara, which was
I'm okay now.
So are they becoming HPOZ?
I think the next
advocates?
I think the next HPOZs are going to be in Leimert Park.
Well, that's where I lived.
And it's a beautiful area.
I know.
And I've met people who are in Leimert Park. Leimert Park is well preserved because it's a stable neighborhood, and I think people love it to this day. So I think it's staying, not going anywhere.
People didn't move in and build bigger houses or tear them down, did they? They couldn't afford it.
Exactly. And I think
That's
what
great.
it.
Oh, and what else? That's very interesting.
The tours are set up. Each neighborhood has its own theme. The houses that I talked about earlier up the hill, big craftsman mansions, 3 stories, 4,000 or 5,000 square feet. That might be a tour one year. University Park just had a tour a couple weeks ago that was more Victorian cottages and some mansions. Jefferson Park obviously would have bungalows. So they pick a theme, and then they go on that, and depending on the time of year, sometimes they have Christmas tours. And
do they have somebody telling what it's about?
Oh, absolutely.
Do you do the narration or whatever?
We all know docents. They each stand in a room and tell a little bit about the house. And I've docented before, and most people I know have docented before. We get calls to be volunteers a lot.
We talk about the changing neighborhood, the changing attitude. I know my daughter lives in the South Carthay HPOZ zone,
HPOZ.
and her family is growing, and she has had opposition to making it larger. So what does somebody do like that? She loves her house, loves it.
I personally think that saying no to everything is not good policy, and I think change is inevitable. The second a house was finished, it started changing. And I think
from way back in the 1900s or the 1930s or whatever?
From the day it was finished, people's needs changed. And it was frequently a discussion in Jefferson Park is how do we accommodate change? They're small houses and people need more room.
Yes, and they love the area. They want to stay there. That's why they bought the house in the first place. So what do you do?
I think there's always an appropriate response, how to make a house bigger that fits in with the house. And so I think there are ways to make a single-story bungalow into a 2-story bungalow appropriately by setting the second floor to the back or detailing it properly, or even extending it in 1 floor to the back. I always think there's an answer. There may not be an answer to make a 1,200 square foot house into a 3,000 square foot house.
But you can add another few.
I think there's always an answer. As an architect, I'm a problem solver.
I was just going to say, as an architect, have you done that? Or do you do that?
Well, on the HPOZ board, I'm the board architect.
Oh, so
and it is my job when an applicant comes in and says, I want to add 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, this is what I want to do. And it's my job to say, I understand what you want to do, I hear what you want to do, and I understand your needs. Let's try looking at it this way. Maybe we can make it work better with your house, and it'll be a win-win for everybody. So basically, they can come in and get a consultation, is what we call it. And so they can consult with us. And
that's the City of LA.
As the City of LA.
Yeah, I see.
So basically city representatives saying, this will fit into the neighborhood better. This will probably help your property value more because you'll preserve the character of your house.
Right.
And it's a win-win.
Yeah, we had this discussion because I think it's very interesting to people all over the United States and probably in Europe too. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thank you so
It's
much.
been a
Don't go
pleasure.
away. We'll be right back with actress Wendy Johnson. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back to the Joan Quinn Profiles. I'm here with actress playwright Wendy Johnson, who graduated from New York University. You've seen her on the stage, in films, and on TV. She has a special interest in the 60s actress Judy Holliday and has written and stars in Concealing Judy Holliday at the Pacific Resident Theater in Venice, California. Were you always going to be in the theater?
Probably.
Did you go to theater school at NYU or not?
I did. I actually worked on my first play when I was like 10 years old.
Oh, so you started early on.
I don't know where I got it in my head, but I...
Did you write it or did you act in it?
I did an adaptation at 10. My mom said, there's no way she's going to do this. An adaptation of the book by Judy Blume, Deanie.
Oh, Judy Blume. Yes, we all read Judy Blume,
Yes,
didn't we?
Yes. But then it never got done. But
And then is that why you went to NYU?
no, I started acting in community stuff like the San Rafael Recreation Center. They did musicals, so I was in a whole bunch of musicals like Guys and Dolls, and
Did you take singing lessons?
I did.
Oh, so in dance and all
I did.
that?
I took all of
Oh,
that.
so you
yeah.
thought you were really active.
Well, I knew I wanted to be an actress.
And where was that?
This is in Marin County.
Oh, so you
Yeah.
were a California girl.
Yeah.
Oh, and you went way back to NYU.
Yeah,
Because did you like the theater
Oh yes.
school there?
Yeah, it was my first choice to go to NYU. And I told my mom if I didn't get in, I was going to go to New York anyway and be a waitress and try to get acting.
So did you act in New York after
Yes.
school?
Yes.
And was it easy getting jobs?
No, it wasn't. Of course. Well, getting small gigs in smaller theaters was not that difficult, but in terms of booking paying work, sure.
But so you started acting. Then what brought you back to LA? Or brought you to LA
LA.
because you were in Northern
Right.
California.
Right. The agent I was working with in New York, they had an agency out in Los Angeles, and he encouraged me to come out and just see if I like it. So I came out during pilot season
Ah.
and stayed with my great uncle who lived in Sherman Oaks. Stayed for a month and decided that I would move.
They had a lot of theater in San Francisco. Did you think of going up there, or have you worked up there?
I haven't. I really wanted to get out of California, and I really wanted to be in New York. And San Francisco is beautiful, but there's not as much work, definitely, as Los Angeles.
No,
especially in TV and film. So.
You've worked with a lot of directors. I know you worked with Jose Rivera. When I was at the show the other night,
Rick Sparks, yeah.
Rick Sparks was there, and Michael Pretzian was there. So I know there's a lot of directors interested in what you're doing. And because you've worked with so many different directors, even say like Jose, who's a really interesting
I really
take
just
on
worked with
things.
him as a playwright, however.
As a playwright.
Yeah.
So he hasn't directed you.
We did his play Sonnets for an Old Century, and that was at Greenway Court Theater.
Oh,
I didn't know
see.
that he directed theater, although I guess maybe sometimes he does.
I
direct
think
his
he
own
directs.
plays. I think
Maybe
you're right.
Yeah. But
Certain
have you?
plays. Yeah.
Do directors find different ways of dealing with you as an actress? That was one of the questions I wanted to ask you.
Like, do they have different approaches?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. I mean, some directors are much more hands-on, and some directors, my least favorite kind of director will just, give you your blocking and really not go into exploring the character very much.
You don't like that?
No.
Because what you like to be told?
I like it to be collaborative, and that's why Guillermo, who's directed Concealing Judy Holliday, he's so wonderful. He gives suggestions, but then he also lets you play.
Guillermo
Cienfuegos.
Guillermo Cienfuegos directed. He's also an actor. Do you think that makes a difference in a director? Someone who's acted before?
Definitely. I mean, it doesn't hurt, because if you've also been an actor, you know what it's like, and you've probably also studied some, and it could only help, I think.
This is a world premiere. Tell us a little bit about how you got into writing and thinking of starring, acting as Judy Holliday.
Well, initially, a reviewer, I was in a different play and had compared me to her.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and so I thought, I sort of knew who she was, but I looked her up online and I found this great website called the Judy Holliday Resource Center. So I just sort of went on there and started looking around and watching film clips. He's got everything, you know, you could possibly want to see. He had old radio clips. He had the full FBI transcripts. Some parts are still, you know, blocked out. But I read and read and read everything about it. And the more I read, the more I thought, there's an interesting story here. The fact that she was, you know, had an IQ of 172 and then played dumb blondes. To me, that was really interesting.
How did you go about starting to write it?
Well, first I just compiled all of this information. I had, you know, this much, and read the biographies. And once I had read everything that I could get my hands on, articles and whatnot, then I just started to think, how could it be set, or how could we tell this story?
It was always going to be a play.
Yes.
It wasn't a book. You didn't think of writing a book about her.
No, I wanted to write a play, and I wanted to play her because it seemed like it would be a great challenge.
And so when you went to the Resource Center, you heard her voice. So that's how you depicted her voice.
Well, actually, it's funny, little Rick Sparks story is that part of my research for this play, I watched Born Yesterday, which I thought I had seen years before, but I couldn't really remember it. The next day, I had an audition for They Shoot Horses, Don't They, at Greenway Court, which Rick
was directing.
Of course, directed. And I was going in for this girl, the character named Jackie, and she loved all the gossip magazines and stuff. And, you know, it's a dance marathon. It's just she's always reading a magazine.
Right.
And so I thought, why don't I try my idea of what that voice sounds like? And I said to Rick, I just saw Born Yesterday last night, and I thought I would try my impression sort of Judy Holliday as Billy Dawn for this character. If it's too big, let me know. And he said, oh, no, I love Judy Holliday. So I ended up doing it in the play, and Rick at one point actually said, you have to write a play about her.
Oh, and you had already,
because he knew I was already.
Had you already looked into it?
Yeah, I sort of put it on the shelf when I would do another production.
Now, what happens with something like that, where Rick is a director, he's a friend of yours, he's directed you. Did he want to direct this, or what happens with something like this?
I gave him a copy of the script to read. I initially thought maybe I would do it at Greenway, and we did have the first public reading at Greenway.
Oh, you did?
But they are so busy, and Rick is so busy, that somehow the schedules never, you know, came aligned, and it just didn't work out that way. But there's no hard feelings, because an opportunity came up at PRT that was just too good to refuse.
Yeah. No, that's why I was so happy to see him there, because I've followed his career for a long time.
Yeah.
He's fantastic.
He is.
And the idea that he encouraged you once he knew what you were doing.
Yeah.
What was that voice? What is that voice?
There's a line in the play, I was like, do the line from the movie, do it! She's like, all right. The famous line is, will you do me a favor, Harry? Drop dead.
That's the famous line,
right? To camera, yes.
So, we were talking about Guillermo. How does he approach it as a director? Because he has no other background, nothing. He's working with you, the playwright. How does he approach doing it?
Well, we'd had many readings of it with friends prior to it being at PRT.
But that's not the same, is it?
No, it's not. It's kind of amazing how everything got together, because I know it's a very complicated piece. I think we all just did exercises at first to get loose with each other, and then we proceeded to break it down into scenes, because it's not really properly broken down into scenes. And we would first just read through it, you know, very gently, not trying to push any kind of emotion, read through the scene, just seated in chairs, and then get on our feet and kind of explore.
Did he cast
talk about it
with you?
Yes.
He cast it with you?
Well, the role of Adolph Green and David and etc., I wrote for my husband.
Oh, of course. Who gives you a big kiss.
Yes. So luckily, he and Melody, who plays the nurse and Yetta and everything, I kind of wrote those parts for them.
I was going to ask about that.
And was very lucky that PRT allowed
oh,
us all to stay, because none of us are members.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see, I see. Were there must have been a lot of technical skills involved.
Oh,
First
yeah.
of all, I love the way you're, can I talk about it? Laying in
please.
bed and the way they
Yeah.
open it up and
Yeah.
make the set. It's brilliant.
That was all, Norman Scott was the designer for lighting and set, and Guillermo, they both came up with that idea.
But to do that, it
'Cause I had
just,
in the script a big bed, but in such a small space, it was kind of a really cool idea to just make the stage the bed.
it was fantastic the way that was. But the one thing that scared me were the platforms. The mother
Oh.
and Tallulah, was it Tallulah?
Mhm.
Yeah, standing on those platforms.
They were bolted down, I think.
But they were like, they were not very big. and you know, they
I know.
did something like that. Frank Gehry directed something at Disney Hall, Don Giovanni. And they were always on platforms. And you get like nervous because people are
Yeah.
acting. And are they thinking about this little area that they're in?
No, they've never said anything that they were
Oh,
scared
so
of.
that's great. That's great. Okay,
Yeah.
and then there's a lot of dancing, choreography, music. Where did that all come from?
Various places, really. We wanted to get the rights to do I'm Going Back from Bells Are Ringing, but we're denied. And I
Uh-huh.
didn't think it was going to be that hard, but the estate just said no, and they didn't say why. So.
But were they approving of what you were doing?
You know, I didn't get
doesn't-
any kind of response. The woman I talked to that owned the sheet music, she said sometimes they just say no,
Oh.
and they don't give a reason.
So is it a lawyer who's involved with the estate that says no? Is that what it would be, or something like
Sure,
that?
if it's I don't really know. What is it? Stratford Music Publishing Company.
Oh,
I think
I see.
the publishing company,
I see.
because they
I see.
dole out the royalties from it.
I see. How much is fact?
Well, all the FBI transcripts, that's all taken exactly from the
It
trials.
was all fact.
With a couple little tweaks to make it silly
Uh-huh.
here and there, and lots of cutting, obviously. It's not the entire transcript. Well, all of the personal relationship stuff, that had to come, you know, out of my
Out
imagination.
of what you were thinking. Was there a lesbian relationship involved?
Yes.
There was a
Yes,
lesbian
yes.
relationship
That's
involved.
that's based on, all the relationships are based on stuff I learned in the biographies, and some of it's stuff she really said.
And how do you keep it fresh? Because you've been there a long time.
Yeah.
You've been there, what, 3 or 4 months, right?
Since March, yeah.
Yeah. So how do you keep it fresh?
Well, the kind of actors that are in the company, and we're all the kind of actors who very much try to, the fun of it is being in the moment, and so that each show is different. It's not about hammering it out
Right,
exactly
yeah.
the same way each time. And Guillermo always says, "Go make a mess." And that's kind of what he means. It's not like a real mess, but keep it messy.
Yeah.
Keep things just happening, or in that new discoveries, and it really does work that way. That's the beauty of the theater.
And we kept it a mess today. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thanks for watching. Keep writing to JAQUINN1 at AOL.com. We'll see you next time on the Joan Quinn Profiles.